Well, who's going to be watching it? You've no idea. I mean, it will record. I think it records. Okay, so you need audio. Are they embedded in your PowerPoint or are they on YouTube? I think people like to use it, in my opinion. Or council block plus YouTube. Possibly. You can. Here though. Or did you open it somewhere else? Because we seem to be. Okay, that's perfect. We'll try it. Which is your presentation? Which one's your presentation? That one. All right. When did you say that? So I just got this morning. I've just taken it down this morning. Oh yeah, please find attached. I was up here then.
I was over there doing it.
Have you got it? You've got it. Yeah, just say it. Browse, yeah. Go down. Oh. I didn't know you was our stream.
Oh, right.
You got sound from this dot? It should be.
The creation of Health and Social Care Scotland is the opportunity to lead a response and to create a system which meets the needs of Scotland's population. It relies on collaboration, strong partnership and the spirit of working with communities, of working together to develop positive relationships across systems to enable change to happen. Our aims are to support the planning of integrated health and social care services across Scotland, to champion the voices of people, our staff and our communities, to collaborate with our partners to help deliver sustainable services,
Right. So that's yours, and we should be able to do that, and you should go over there, and then you can make it full screen.
The creation of Health and Social Care Scotland is the opportunity to lead a
Okay.
response and to create a system which meets the needs of Scotland's population. It relies on collaboration.
I will be happy that we can manage. Okay. That sound I need to get. So we've got sound there.
It's that sort of version of my face the car parks and go. Look at it. Where am I going to go? Hi, how are you doing? Fine, thank you. What's the it is sort of like save you so
Put the microphone here and speak.
One, two. One, two. Two. One, two. Two. It's very, very low. Two. 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 One, two, maybe mic level. One, two, 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 two. One, two. One, two.
2, 1. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1. Yeah, they're always low. They're always delayed. 2, because our actual. 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1. Hey. 1, 2. 1, 2.
to work together to shape and influence policy, practice and legislation, and to support the development of capable and confident system leaders. This statement of intent reflects a long-standing strategic commitment between the partnerships to develop and deliver health and social care services in an integrated way. This builds on the essential transformation of our care systems in communities and helps create a more sustainable, compassionate and caring Scotland. The focus is different, the feel is different, and the collective ambition is clear. Health and Social Care Scotland represents a new social movement influencing, enabling and creating partnerships that deliver high quality care in communities. The movement needs to think beyond traditional approaches to strategic change, creating a culture to support innovation. We aim to galvanise the full capacity and capabilities of our partners in care and identify breakthroughs, ensuring these are spread across the system. We will fully reflect the purpose, values, outcomes and ambition set out in the National Performance Framework. We will now focus to support the following 5 essential elements. 1. Transforming the approach to improving health, well-being and independence by developing foundations for good health, tackling risk factors, not accepting the increasing profile of some conditions and diseases as something which is beyond our control, and supporting people and communities to care for themselves and each other across the life course. 2. Building stronger community care systems and primary care services by co-producing and creating a radical overhaul of the models of care and infrastructure needed to support local communities, including access to multidisciplinary teams and creating a step change treatment to be delivered collaboratively with our partners, aiming to lead a whole system change to create a more proactive and responsive framework in our communities which responds to key life changes and supports action in priority areas. 4. Securing a sustainable acute hospital service and specialist care service for Scotland by collaborating with colleagues via emerging regional plans and national planning forums, designing a new map and future vision for access to The creation of Health and Social Care Scotland is the opportunity to lead a response and to create a system which meets the needs of Scotland's population. It relies on collaboration, strong partnership and the spirit of working with communities, of working together to develop positive relationships across systems to enable change to happen. Our aims are to support the planning of integrated health and social care services across Scotland, to champion the voices of people, our staff and our communities, to collaborate with our partners to help deliver sustainable services, to work together to shape and influence policy, practice and legislation, and to support the development of capable and confident system leaders. This statement of intent reflects a long-standing strategic commitment between the partnerships to develop and deliver health and social care services in an integrated way. This builds on the essential transformation of our care systems in communities and helps create a more sustainable, compassionate and caring Scotland. The focus is different, the feel is different and the collective ambition is clear. Health and Social Care Scotland represents a new social movement influencing, enabling and creating The creation of Health and Social Care Scotland is the opportunity to lead a response and to create a system which meets the needs of Scotland.
That's fine, and I'll go and have a cigarette and I'll come back up more.
pilot for the new. So that was interesting.
Yeah.
We got a couple of things.
That's good. Yeah. Yeah, it'll be interesting.
What she fed back to Jean was that what the found was in care homes, not so much care homes when it started, but providers have not been free.
Alright,
So I thought, well, why is that a problem with the framework? Surely the standard is a 5
the same.
it should be,
Yeah.
or whatever.
I mean, there's certainly been going people that got sixes before and not getting sixes anymore.
Yeah.
It's impossible to get. But yeah, like you say, I was a big product.
I mean, the criteria for 6 now is
No, but I think there are some of some that have had sixes and feel like they'll drop into a 5. The care sectors and themselves have been very, very good to say, this isn't a drop in, it's just the way that the criteria is now described.
you essentially need partner service to be so innovative and unique. And that's not going to last forever. No, apart from that, all good. Just some challenges down there that are up here. How long have you been up here for?
Oh gosh. 5 years maybe? Because he was just still, the two of them were stuff like
Yeah, he's retired now, yeah.
enjoying it.
Still involved in that, we should bounce ideas off each other in terms of day-to-day. No, I think he's a lot to do. I can appreciate why. It's a good sign. Hard work. Yeah, but that news is 70, 80 million or something.
Coming from Ireland and hitting the west coast.
So we might miss the
I don't know, I think Ireland's getting the west coast.
we're quite protected by the Grampians, so expecting a full house.
Yeah, I think so.
Interested to see what. So is it to bring all frameworks under? Is it just have one framework?
Well, not to be honest, I think it's, so I think the first half is just sort of general sort of strategic stuff, and then the last bit is about the frameworks and tricky for Karen and I'm not sure what to put into that. Yeah, so it'll be good to see what the reaction is.
Status quo doesn't really work anymore.
So we'll see.
Sure, we'll get that an honest response.
Not yet, no. We wait to see what we got some friends that moved out to Oman. We went to see them in October, and they're only going to be out there for 2 years. So we were planning on doing some Middle East travel next. See what happens. We want to go to Jordan. Yeah, so Oman is, the Sultan's just died on Friday, and so they were, he's been a very stabilising, he's been in for 4 years and completely changed infrastructure. live in a stable country. But I've been thinking that it's his cousin, because he didn't have any heirs, his cousin has now taken over, and the feeling is he will
You realise how long we've lived.
Yes, yeah. I know. So yeah, but a man, and the children in itself, I think, is a stable country. It's just if you want to do it, you just want to wait and see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, especially the airline that you go to.
I know, well, that's it. So I know that could happen.
Just planning on just now. Son's a big mind fighter, so we do a bit of tour with the food. Summer. I had to sort of make various places. So yeah, I've never been. Well, I've been to these schools because pretty serious. We've got a international exchange just outside Toronto. But I've not been to the west side of Oh, we're camping around because it's
one of those big trees.
yeah. So we did that. So we did flights sometime for that. There was a bond in there. My wife's reading up about bears and
Yes, especially in camping.
myself. Most of the campsites are protected.
Are they?
So on. I know.
Protecting one another.
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Fine, yeah.
How are you?
Yeah, no, it's alright.
It's all rolled over so fast.
I know.
Last time I saw you, you were heading home.
Sorry?
Last time I saw you, you were heading
Oh,
home.
that's right. Yeah.
It's a good time.
Yeah.
Kids like it.
We did, but weirdly, my daughter, who didn't expect to like it, loved it. And her son was a go, yeah, it was okay. It's just, he's like me, he doesn't like the heat. The heat was fine, it was humidity. But it was good. Exactly, yeah. Introduce some back. Yeah. So,
That's awesome.
Looking forward to today.
Yeah.
interesting. Hopefully it'll be returning.
Well, that's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Just remember when we were at the meeting, you think about Richard Warren and Helen and said, would you like some
It was 1 o'clock at the start. Okay.
We're doing the split in it's just about got some good when speaking to when I was supposed to see
How was your meeting
I asked them
this morning?
to do maybe a event like this week, so that either all right.
they're actually yeah. Yeah. Well, it has to be real. It's interesting you.
Yeah, she's not a bit shoes.
Always love to hear from you, know that.
I know, that was something we had lots of discussions about timing, you know, whether is it better for, you know, one provider all at once, but whatever we do, it's yeah, and it's going to be at the same time.
I think it's got the next album there. I was seeing it.
Oh, yeah, but they were clearly on the
all of Teesside, well, so Duncan both
Too long to be stop saying one.
I know, it's always that
Hello.
debate.
Yes. Happy New Year. Well. I wouldn't overstep that mark. Yeah, I know he looked well. He didn't say anything, but he alluded to the fact that it was a good spend so many hours there every week, you know, you need to be careful what you're doing. So,
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, time to test that the microphone's working. Can everybody hear me? Okay, pick it up. I don't like microphones. Can you hear me now? Is that better? Yes. Closer. Close. I'll start singing soon. No, I won't. I won't promise. Good afternoon to one and all. There's a lot of people in the room. It's absolutely fantastic to see so many people here today. When I saw the weather forecast last night, I just thought, what's going to happen? Are people going to come or not come? But thank you ever so much. I think most people say it's okay until you get around the corner of the beach ballroom and you get into the full blast of the sea. So it's lovely to see everybody here today. I have to say that we're completely overwhelmed by the response that has been to this afternoon. I think we were expecting a when we put the invitation out that maybe 20 people would come, but you would have picked up from us having to change the venue that actually we had a lot more people than we had expected, so here we all are. For those people who don't know me, I'm Anne Mackenzie. I'm the lead commissioner with the Aberdeen City Health and Social Care Partnership, so it's really good to see you, and hopefully, if I haven't said hello to you at the door, hopefully I'll be able to catch up with you later on in the afternoon. We'll get the logistical information out of the way first and make sure that I get this right. So if you haven't already realised, the toilets are downstairs, so time to get your step count up for the day if that's the way, if you're so inclined. We're not expecting a fire alarm this afternoon, although I am told there have been a few issues with the fire alarm today. So if the fire alarm does go off, our exit is down the stairs, and you'll be pleased to hear that our muster point is on the pavement, just outside. So I know when I was at school they said if the fire alarm goes off, don't take your coat with you, but maybe today we would let you take your coat with you. So I just thought I would just do a very brief introduction. You've got the programme, hopefully you've seen the programme. It's been emailed out to you several times now with several amendments. There's a copy of it on the table. So we're just starting off with an introduction for myself, then a presentation from Sandra and myself. And then really, today is a lot about networking and about starting to collaborate with each other. So we decided to give quite a lot of time to having conversations with people and just to reflect really on what it is you've heard. So the question is, on the 13th of January, just after New Year, on a really blowy day, why are we here? Why did we put this invitation out? It was really because we've been gathering to a greater or lesser extent over the course of this last year through our provider network. And we've also had workshops where we've been trying to design consider some of the ways we're going to be working in the future. And what has come across loud and clear is it's good that you're meeting with me, it's good that you're chatting these things through with me, but actually you need to connect with other people within my organisation. You need to connect to chief executives, to board members, because actually that's where a lot of the decisions are made. So here we are. That's why the invitation went out. So basically, we're here because that's something that we've heard that would be important for us to do. I don't know that I need to say anything else. I think I've said what the programme's about this afternoon. It is about a conversation. It's about a big conversation, and really we're looking for feedback from you about how we're doing this just now, and that's really what that open space and the comments and questions afterwards will be there for. So I'm not going to prolong the introduction any further. I'm going to hand over to Sandra Ross. Between us, we have enough technical knowledge to get from this slide to another slide. I'll hand you over to Sandra for the next 20 minutes or so.
Okay, I'll start the process again. Can everyone hear me? Yep. Yeah, okay. So I'd like to welcome everyone again, just to express my thanks as well, following on from Anne. We're really overwhelmed by the number of people here today, and hopefully that you'll find that the journey and taking the time to come and meet us today has been worth it. Right, as Anne said, my name's Sandra Ross and Sandra McLeod, so that changing names all the time just to confuse people. I'm Chief Officer for Aberdeen City Health and Social Care Partnership. And the partnership here is one of 30 partnerships across the whole of Scotland, as you'll be aware. And the key thing about us as a partnership is we are a partnership, but we need to work in partnership to promote integration. It's a key thing for us that we are working with our partners and we're working with everyone who's round about to make sure that we start to progress. The health and social care partnerships across Scotland have a broad statement of intent, and I'm going to, as much as what I can stand up here and give you a lot of spiel about what's our best way, what's our vision, I think this 2-minute, I'm going to give you a 2-minute video, so apologies to those of you who may well have seen this before. But this, I think, summarises the intent of the health and social care partnerships across Scotland, and also certainly summarises our intent just now. So, technical ability here, so bear with me. Sorry, technical. Well, that's it then.
The creation of Health and Social Care Scotland is the opportunity to lead a response and to create a system which meets the needs of Scotland's population. It relies on collaboration, strong partnership and the spirit of policy, practice and legislation, and to support the development of capable and confident system leaders. This statement of intent reflects a long-standing strategic commitment between the partnerships to develop and deliver health and social care services in an integrated way. This builds on the essential transformation of our care systems in communities and helps create a more sustainable, compassionate and caring Scotland. The focus is different, the feel is different and the collective ambition is clear. Health and Social Care Scotland represents a new social movement influencing, enabling and creating partnerships that deliver high quality care in communities. The movement needs to think beyond traditional approaches to strategic change, creating a culture to support innovation. We aim to galvanise the full capacity and capabilities of our partners in care and identify breakthroughs, ensuring these are spread across the system. We will fully reflect the purpose, values, outcomes and ambition set out in the National Performance Framework. We will now focus to support the following 5 essential elements. 1. Transforming the approach to improving health, well-being and independence by developing foundations for good health, tackling risk factors, not accepting the increasing profile of some conditions and diseases as something which is beyond our control, and supporting people and communities to care for themselves and each other across the life course. 2. Building stronger community care systems and primary care services by co-producing and creating a radical overhaul of the models of care and infrastructure needed to support local communities, including access to multidisciplinary teams and creating a step change in improvements to the digital infrastructure, enabling more anticipatory care, assessment, care and treatment to be delivered in people's own homes. 3. Establishing a new focus on mental health by working collaboratively with our partners, aiming to lead a whole system change to create a more proactive and responsive framework in our communities which responds to key life changes and supports action in priority areas. 4. Securing a sustainable acute hospital service and specialist care service for Scotland by collaborating with colleagues via emerging regional plans and national planning forums, designing a new map and future vision for access to acute and specialist care services in Scotland. And 5. Strengthening future partnerships to ensure a modern, sustainable workforce, aiming to create a future profile of care providers where integration is the norm, capturing and supporting the contribution of all partners in care, including statutory bodies, the independent sector, voluntary sector, social enterprises, carers and communities. This will need all leaders to think differently and act swiftly. We will now create the series of collaborative conversations and changes required through partnership at a local and national level. Our hope is that you will support us in your communities, your organisations and your partnerships.
Okay, so hopefully, I'm not sure if anyone's seen that before, but that really outlines what the ambition for the health and social care partnerships are. The key things that it is about a social movement, it is about something that we're doing entirely differently. But this is new and we are all working together on this. So what we don't have is a firm laid out roadmap, but we do certainly have some key principles. So this is really awkward to be holding the microphone. So, yeah. Oh. Okay. Today, when we've approached looking at how we start to commission and how we start to look at care, one of the key things that we looked at was our starting point about where we are today. My background is not traditional public sector, my background is independent sector, so I feel that having been on, if you like, both sides of the fence and seen what it's like around, there are some things that for those who have been around care at home, supported living services, that things have changed considerably over the last few decades. In fact, things, if you think about it, it's only about 30 years ago that people were still in long-term care of the elderly wards, they weren't out in the community, care at home was a brand new thing. We've came an absolutely massive way in that 30 years' time, and even within the last decade or two we've still considered moving forward. But there's some key things that we really need to change now, and we can't move forward and continue in the same way. Trust is a key thing. These are the principles about how we want to move forward as a partnership and how we want to move forward with our partners. And trust is a key one. Trust for us is about trusting each other as providers, about understanding that there is that we need to look to each other to be able to deliver the best that they can be. We're not expecting, trust has been something that over the past, I would say, decade or so, it's become much more about measuring. It's become much more about what are you doing, much more about time and task. How do we evidence value for money? How do we cut money back? How do we do that? And I think what that has generally lent for is that there has been a bit of a potential lack of trust moving forward. What we're asking for in this today, and what you will see as we move forward, is trust is one of the fundamental principles that we move forward on. We have to understand that everyone is here to make the system work, and it's the whole system that we're looking at. Now, whether that be an independent provider, we just have to understand that people are looking to, there is an operating profit to be made. If we're looking at third sector, so these are implicit, there's no getting away from that. Let's just own that, keep it in the room and keep moving forward, but trust each other to be understanding that we're all trying to do the best. That leads on to mutual respect, and that's a key thing. There isn't anybody in any of our services that we believe that is coming out and saying, well, what we actually want to do is deliver a bad job. But most people want to try to do the same thing, and what we have to have is some mutual respect for each other. Again, this is built on that and moving it forward. If we don't respect each other and each other's contribution, then the whole format about how we start and how we start to move forward in this commissioning approach won't work. Collaboration, it's a word that's frequently used. Okay, we all work collaboratively. It's the new, sometimes feels it's a bit of a new buzzword. But fundamentally, it is the truth. It's about working in partnership. It's about looking across our whole system, about understanding that there's unintended consequences if we don't work in collaboration. We've seen today in the press about closure of a daycare service can have a knock-on effect that can be moved forward. So there's lots of different things that we need to be working in. But sitting down and working in genuine collaboration is important. It's not about saying, here's the tender, let's go, and how are you going to deliver that? It's about designing, it's about co-production, it's about understanding each other's risks. The next, our joint ambition, again, effective use of resources, our people, our time and our finance. This is about joint risk sharing. There is nobody in here who is a provider, or whether they're public service, or whether we're commissioners, or whether we're contractors. We all have a degree of risk. It's about sharing that risk and having a joint ambition for moving that forward. We need to maximise our capacity. Fundamentally, within Aberdeen City, we have our care homes. We operate way up at 97%. We have lots of our care providers. There's constantly we have more work, if you like, than what we have capacity. However, a lot of that is about meeting our demand and about our workforce. We have to just change that and move forward. It needs to be person-led. Too far in the past have we worked and designed our services round about service need, round about contract, round about time, round about saying what can we do for that, and about the money. And it is all about that, I do get that. But at the heart of this, we're all here to deliver for the people. We're all here to deliver our services for what's important for them. Prevention, resilience, and connections. We need to start ensuring that we have some the prevention agenda. As a partnership, we're firmly focused on working with our children, moving forward, as it said earlier, about disease control. It's really important that we start to work on that, and things like our walk-in, about our well-being agenda, about starting to really shape things differently about keeping our older people well. We did a survey recently as part of our strategic planning and asked, it was older people's framework, but part of that we asked people who are not yet, my age, early 40s, 50s, and folk coming forward and saying, well, what is it? People understand the key health messages. They know they should eat right. They know they should exercise. Okay, they know that it's about good mental health. But the key thing is that do we do that for our workforce? Do we look after our workforce? Our workforce is our future clients, so we need to keep making them. And the resilience we're talking about is not only resilience of people, but resilience of organisation. It's about resilience of our marketplace. It's resilience so that we don't have failures. There is no point in designing systems and services that are going to cause systems to collapse. We understand and we're learning by working closely with our providers what are the key factors that we need, what needs to be in place, what has to be there for sustainable models, sustainable business, what makes good business sense. But at the same time, because what makes good business sense means that we'll be able to deliver sustainable care for the people in our services. Okay, this is our broad model. We've used this model, and this is about our funding, and again, you'll have opportunity to chat on this later. We have two of our services who are vanguards in this. One of them is Bon Accord Care, and the other one is Inspire. Both of them have used, we've got some contractual arrangements whereby they're testing out this model. And again, I use the word test because there is a lot about this, as you'll hear from Anne. It is about trust, all the things that I mentioned earlier. What we understand from this is that if you are a provider, year-to-year contracts are not giving us any benefit. 2-year contracts are not helping. You need a length of contract that will allow you to make investment decisions where you know what's coming up and what you know what's there. We also understand that the cost, the demand for services, salaries are rising, overheads are rising, training needs. We all have the same shared overheads. We understand that if somebody moves, and there is always movement of staff, there's that peripheral shift, but people are moving around and then they've got to be retrained and then trained again and then trained again. What can we do to share that? How can we start to really work and start to collaborate and help our resources? The availability of staff is a reduction. We know that we have an increase in demographic, we've got an increase in older people, but we also know that we've got a reducing workforce in Aberdeen. So even if we had all the money, we still wouldn't be able to fund it because we can't find the people to employ. There just isn't the population, and we see that time and time again of people coming in, our services, and it is down to where is our workforce. We have to think radically different about how we're delivering. There's lots of incentives in digital and technology. The other bit is the available funding. It's no new story to everyone to understand that public sector funding is been under increasing pressure for the last few years and is likely to be facing forward as well. There isn't any big pile of money, as in there's no big pile of staff. But what we want to do is understand that if the key principles are based on saying an extended length of contract with an understanding about what that cash looks like, and then saying what are the larger things that we need to invest in. So as you'll see from the top here, investments and change. As a partnership, that's what we're keen to do. How can we invest whole city? How can we invest whole system? What does that need to look like? And when we're investing, instead of coming back and saying, right, okay, it's just uplift, and how do we do more of the same? How do we radically change things and make them for the difference? This model here is designed to help innovation, to help it move forward, but also that people understand the duration of the contract, so the faster you move, if people are incentive and move forward, then that's where we go. This is not based on time and task, this is absolutely based on person-centred, but it is a bit of a radical shift. We have 2 vanguards there. That's really all I want to say just now. I'm going to hand over to Anne, who will give you a bit more of the theory behind there. But finally, just to say, you will hear a lot today, and we're really interested when everyone is going around the table, when we do have time. We need to understand what does this feel like, what does this approach feel like. It will be important for us to hear that from you. So thank you very much. Anne?
there's just a couple of people just arrived, so we'll just let them get settled, and then I will move on. That's fine. Just sit anywhere. It's fine. Just make yourselves at home. Okay, so as Sandra said, I'm just going to try and give you an overview of what it is that we've been trying to do for the last 12 to 18 months here in the city. Maybe a little bit about my background as well. I don't have a background in commissioning. I have grown up for a long time through the NHS. I'm a physiotherapist by background. I had no experience of commissioning until I came to this job a year last November. So this journey has been really, it's been a big learning curve for me, but it's been quite nice because I didn't know an awful lot about it before I came into it. So I've kind of been growing up with the people that have been around me and informed by them. So that's where I'm coming at from this. So, so hopefully people will have had a chance to have a look at, if they want to, a copy of our strategic commissioning approach. I think it was sent out with the invitation. If you haven't, that's fine. Just let Sandra Marnock know. We can make sure that that's available to you for going forwards. So when I first came into post, I think what we established was that we needed something that was an approach that was consistent across the partnership, because we knew that there needed to be some change. So we worked really quite hard and had a look at what the recommendations were for an approach. And I'm just going to use my notes here because it's probably easier. So what I'm going to do here is give you an overview of our approach, and then give you an overview with some examples of what we've been trying to do to facilitate the market. And in particular, the development of our market position statements, and I'll add in our 3-year strategic commissioning plan to that, and an update with colleagues who are in the room around our provider network, and also to update you about some advancements with our training passport. But as Sandra said, listen to what I'm saying and then use the time afterwards to give us some feedback. So as I said, we decided that when I came into post that we needed a fairly coherent approach that was recognised not just by yourselves as provider services, but also by people working within our organisation, because I suppose commissioning happens on a daily basis. We commission a lot of activity. I don't necessarily hold the purse strings to that, so I suppose it's how do I influence people working within our own organisation as much as people working within independent and third sector organisations. So we worked really hard, and we developed a joint strategic commissioning approach with colleagues in Aberdeen City Council. As a partnership, we're not a commissioning authority, so we have to direct the council to commission on our behalf. And more recently, we're doing a lot more commissioning through and contracting through the NHS. So it's important that we had an agreed approach by all. The strategic commissioning approach is really regarded as one of the means with which we will transform services going forwards. So how do we commission for outcomes which are at a macro level, how we design and deliver services to achieve the outcomes for people living within the city? As Sandra says, outcomes for people will be at the very centre of everything that we do. That's what's going to lead our activity. And again, at a macro level, that might be how do we improve services for an area of deprivation. So we know that there's clear areas of deprivation within the city, and they bring with them the challenges as a population. But also at a very individual level, how do I achieve, what is it that I want to achieve for myself through the provision of care? And that helps us then to move away from a task and time orientated focus to something which really helps us think about this person as an individual. So how do we keep the person in the room? And to do that, we also need to link very closely with our localities and our communities to understand what is it that we can then link people back into for the future to really start to give them their lives back wherever possible. As Sandra says, this requires system leadership, so it's whole system. So it's a statutory sector, the Health and Social Care Partnership, our acute sector colleagues, but also people, all of you in the room, and also our communities, but also the individuals living within Aberdeen, because a lot of what we're describing is as much of a change for them as it is for all of us as well. As Sandra says, transformation doesn't come without risk, but I think we need to take some risks, because if we don't take risks and do things differently, I don't know what this, I can't recall the saying, but I think it's something along the lines of, if you continue to do what you've always been doing, then you'll end up with the same results. So we need to have different results, so with M4 we need to do something differently. And that feels a bit scary, I have to say. Standing here it feels a bit scary, very scary this afternoon. But sometimes you do feel like you're on that, I was quite traumatised by my swimming lessons, and I can remember being asked to jump in off the deep end, and all the swimming instructor had was a stick with a bit of a circle of rope to catch me at the end of it. I always remember that. And that's sometimes what this feels like on a daily basis. You just think, at some point I'm going to have to jump off the edge and get this done. And I think, so it's how do we share that risk? If it's scary for me, and maybe it's scary for other people, how do we enter into that together and in partnership? There's probably quite a lot about relationships, so I've really appreciated starting to form relationships with people through the Providers Network and through conversations that we've had and through collaborative workshops. And it's really nice when people walk in through the door and it's a familiar face. So how do we start to strengthen those relationships? How do we move to more of a collaborative, collective understanding of what it is we need to achieve? How do we build trust? How do we build mutual respect going forwards in the future? And a lot of that is, as Sandra said, based on collaboration. And I think my understanding of collaboration, I think Sandra's quite right. We talk about collaboration quite glibly. It seems to be the in word. But in my head, collaboration is really where you put the person in the centre of your thinking. So really your organisational identity, if we truly want to get this done for people, your organisational identity should leave you by the door. So you could say, I've grown up in the NHS, I've got a stick of rock, I'm like a stick of rock with the NHS through me, but I would hate for that to be the case. My focus is on how do we deliver outcomes for people, and I think if you think in that way, it doesn't matter where you come from, everybody's got something to give, including the person themselves, I would say. So part of our process, I'll speak about our governance processes about the end so that people understand how decisions are made through the organisation, but part of our process is that we've worked really closely with our integrated joint board members. They're very important members for us, and it's really important that they understand where we're coming from, because they don't want anything to happen that compromises the delivery of care to people in the city. In fact, our strategic risks register, market sustainability is one of the key risks, or a risk to market sustainability is one of the key risks, and their tolerance level for that is really very, very low. So what they asked us to do when we spoke to them about this is they said, well, what does it look like now, and what would it be like in the future? So I just decided to share that with you. And this, I'm just hoping this isn't like, it's when your children say, I'll help you with that PowerPoint presentation, it comes on in Barbie pink. My kids haven't been anywhere near this, but I just hope it's not all going to fly in letter by letter. No, it's not, that's fine. So this is, I think, as I said, I haven't had a huge amount of experience of this, but this is what I've been led to believe it could have potentially felt like in the past. So reactive and driven by the contract cycle. I feel, since I've come in this job, that I feel like I'm running after a bus that has left the bus stop a couple of minutes ago. I've never been in a situation before where I feel like I need to have had to work really, really hard to get ahead of the game. And I think that contract cycle, you know, that pressure when you know that a contract is due for renewal and needs to be reviewed, you're constantly chasing after that. The statutory sector is a key decision maker, so basically perhaps people have gone away in a darkened room and said this is what's going to happen, and then it's news to everybody else. Consideration of the term of the contract, so thinking short term, like Sandra says, year to year, rather than, but I think if we're really going to try and change outcomes for people, like Sandra said, we should really be thinking about what we're doing with children now for the future. I was listening to somebody on the television yesterday saying about criminal justice, and actually a lot of our attention should be focused on primary schools, because we know that by early intervention with children, then we might be able to change people's lives going forwards in the future. A redesign opportunity not considered, so commissioning the same over and over again. Service-led, the time prioritised on the procurement process. I work really closely and wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the procurement team. They keep me right every step of the way, but maybe in the past we've sort of focused too much on the contract. Thinking about things in a single system, lack of clarity of intent with a mismatch of provision and demand. So I think what I'm trying to say there is, what is the outcome that we're trying to achieve through this? And that's really where we need to start, not what's the logistics of the contract, but what is it that we need to be trying to change by commissioning in this particular way. Performance indicators isolated to the contract, and I'll speak about that in a little bit, and a refresh of the current position. So these might fly in, oh no they haven't, there we go. So what would it look like in the future? So what we're saying in our strategic commissioning approach is, what do we understand are the needs of the population? We can get that through data from health intelligence. I think, as Sandra alluded to, it's really important to get that data from people who are receiving care, and sometimes that's really, really tricky to do, actually. So what does it need to look like? A collaborative approach to design. So we've got a couple of examples of that, and some of you might have been around the discussions that we've had. We've had a couple of workshops to help us design what we want to do for the provision of care at home and supported living. And there's been a lot of learning in the room. It's been really good to meet people, but there's been a lot of learning. It's been open to all to come and help us design that what should be in that contract. As Sandra says, consideration of the longer term. Transformation is a priority, so that goes back to what is it we're trying to do. Is what we're doing just now fit for purpose? Is what we're doing just now, is what we're commissioning just now, is the design of that going to allow us to meet the outcomes that are necessary? Shifting the time to designing the right things. So some people might have experienced or be experiencing or experience in the future us saying, we need to extend this contract to give us time to truly consider what are the needs of the population, how are we delivering it just now, what does the evidence tell us, what do people tell us, what does the intelligence tell us, and describe that gap and then commission in a way to try and close that gap. A whole system approach, we've already spoken to that. Clear direction to the market, and I'll go on to speak about that because I think that links to our market position statement. Thinking about our strategic outcomes and also creative thinking. So is what we're doing just now, is it as innovative as it might be? So as Sandra says, on a daily basis we've got unmet need, hours and hours of unmet need in the city. Could we think differently about how we provide that care in the future that might address that unmet need? Where are the innovative thinkers? I don't know what you were like, but I always used to think, well, if we did it this way, then that could happen. But I never really had a voice to be able to say, this is how this could happen. So how do we get those ideas flowing as we design the way we provide services? So if you've had a look at the document, I'm just conscious that I'm not very good at this. I think I might be standing in front of the slides. I'm really sorry. We will share them with you afterwards. But this is our strategic commissioning approach, kind of on a page. This is what's in our strategic commissioning document. So if you just bear with me, I think that's what I've just spoken about, the whole needs assessment, the whole needs design, and then the gap analysis. But if you just bear with me, what I would like to focus on now is the doing bit and the bit about market facilitation, because that's where some of our tests of change are actually happening just now. So with market facilitation, as Sandra said, our key aim has to be market sustainability. I think we've all been around times where there's been a failure of provision, and it's a really difficult place for everybody to be. It's a scary place, thinking, are you going to be able to provide care to people that have been receiving care? There's a huge amount of work. So how do we work together to make sure that we develop and sustain services for the future, but services where the capacity meets the demand, but also that we don't lose the quality that we need? And when I've read things about market facilitation, it's spoken about we need market intelligence, we need market structure, and we need market intervention. So I'm going to go on and expand a little bit about examples that we have of those, that I think we have of those anyway. So market intelligence. So what we're trying to do just now is, and our 3-year plan. So what we're trying to do just now is to try and pull together a market position statement. So in my head, we don't currently have the information that you need that says this is the direction of travel that we think we need to be going in the future. So, and I think what that means, or my experience has been that maybe we get things that are developing which are out of kilter with our strategic thinking. And I think it would be more helpful if we could develop the market position statement that then almost sets out a bit of a beacon to say this is what we think, you know, based on our intelligence, this is what we need. So there's a really good, I found it quite helpful, a really good guide to say what does a good market position statement look like, and I'm working with that with colleagues. And I have to say that generally speaking, it is a collaborative approach. So at the moment we work with Scottish Care and ACFO around some of these discussions. So based on our very intuitive understanding of where the gaps are in the market, our market position statement will probably cover the following things. So really, people requiring end-of-life care. When I say that, it's more likely to be people under the age of 65 who require end-of-life care. People with complex needs, and when I say that, people with complex needs, but generally speaking, people with complex needs and challenging behaviour. So at the moment, I'm sure other partnerships are the same. We have to look for support for people on occasion out with Aberdeen City because we don't have the right facilities or we don't have the right level of skill to look after people. And we want to try and change that going forward in the future so that we are able to provide that in the future. And those complex needs, I think in the past we might have looked down a particular type of individuals. So if we're speaking about, we might speak about people with acquired brain injury or people with learning disability. Is there an opportunity for us to look at complex needs in total about how people present? So we're really speaking about those situations where people have got an acquired brain injury, whether that's through substance misuse or whether it's through trauma or people with a learning disability. And finally, people with learning disabilities, but when I say that, people with learning disabilities requiring residential care and with or without a diagnosis of dementia. So I'll speak now a little bit about what we're trying to do around structuring the market. And I'm going to call on a few friends to help me with this one. Hopefully they're in the room. So we have had 4 meetings now of our provider network within the city. And it's not the partnerships provider network, it's the providers provider network really. But we regard it as an opportunity to take key strategic challenges and have a shared conversation, a bit like this, so quite often they're held in this room, to have a conversation about how do we meet these challenges. Now I don't organise these meetings, so I did ask some colleagues to maybe help me describe what that means. Jane, are you going to do it?
Yeah, there's both of us here.
Would you like the microphone?
Shall I just yell?
That would be very good, yes.
Fiona, would you like to because you started?
Sorry, I'm one of those glasses on and glasses off kind of people.
I think I'm going to bring you the microphone because it's a big room.
Okay, it's really just a little bit of insight into the preparation really for today and all the things that's going to come head towards us in 2020. So it's going back to explain for those who may not have been in the room during 2019 that the whole point of the network provider and partners network is about bringing people together. It's about having yourselves all around the table, meeting each other, because obviously as providers you may have an opportunity to bump into one another, but not necessarily get to know what one another do and how you do it, why you do it that way, what you're planning next, because everybody has to plan. You know, we're all running organisations. You don't just work month to month. It's got to be a plan, and most people have got their own business plan. So it's really an opportunity for all of you to come together with the actual partners who are behind the scenes perhaps for you quite a lot of the time, so that you get to know them, get to know where they're coming from, what their priorities are, and also what their intentions are, because their intentions are going to be your intentions, because they're obviously buying in your services. You've already identified this afternoon already some of the challenges, and they're not going to be new, I don't think, to anyone in the room. Having worked in trauma myself, I'm very aware of the challenges, for example, in brain injury and things. And we have good services, but we don't have nearly enough. And that's only one example. Learning disability is the same, mental health is the same. It's a growing demand. And as we expect more of ourselves as individuals, we expect more of ourselves in terms of services. So we're always looking for best quality and good quality. So really this providers network has had different topics every time. We meet on a quarterly basis. The first one was in March last year. It seems actually less than that, but it's a good 10 months ago. So we've got ideas from the partners and the providers. What is it you want to see? What do you want us to be discussing? So hopefully this afternoon will start to make sense to at least some of you, if not all of you, because you've had a taster of it before. But today is looking at how do we develop that? We've already got to know one another on a sort of informal basis, but maybe we need to formalise a little bit more as we go forward, and more of that will be shared with you this afternoon. But it is about all the things that's been said. It's about collaboration. It is about trust. And trust doesn't come without getting to know someone in the first place, because we can all tell a good story. We can all believe that we are the best at what we do and we're doing it the best we can. And that's great, and that's exactly what we hope for. But we also have to be able to convince other people that if we want to work in partnership, how do you choose a partner? How do you find the best match for the organisation that you might work for that may want to work closer with someone else? So if I just leave you with that thought, and I'm going to hand over to my very capable colleague, Jane. I also forgot to say who the heck I am. Sorry, I'm Fiona Mather from Scottish Care.
It's quite good to have a mic because I think the BFG is trying to get in below, so I hope you can hear me all right. Yes, the network has met 4 times. If you haven't come, you're more than welcome to come in the future. We felt it was really important that our provider, we're able to escalate operational and strategic issues. Again, nearly all the issues come from the floor itself. And we can, because we invite representatives from the whole of health and social care, not only is Anne here and Sandra sometimes, but also our colleagues from around health and social care, and they can tell us exactly who to speak to in exactly the department we're trying to target. So for example, if it was an issue about discharge, we immediately trying to find out who was around that area, why were these problems happening, and the important thing is that we can have those conversations, we can get resolution, and then we can spread that knowledge back. So it's not just feedback from, but it's also feedback to. The other thing is that, and it's important, is we can share what's working. There are some very good things working in the city, but it's important that that feedback is two-way. Not just to our sectors, but also from our sectors. We talked about the market positioning statement. What underpins that is market intelligence. And if we don't have intelligence from all of yourselves, but also from our different sources nationally, then our market position statement won't be leading us into the right direction. So we are talking about the years ahead. The market positioning statement, the first draft for Aberdeen City, is going to appear in the next 6 months. But we're not actually talking about just the next 3 years. We're talking about the next 10 years and the next 15 years. Because we need to look at not just how we're preparing, but we need to look at future demands and the identifications of needs as they change. We talked about systems, but our system needs to be visible. So our forum helps us to see what the system actually looks like. We need to agree priorities, as Fiona mentioned, but we also need to learn and adapt, because there are changes afoot. There have been changes afoot for a while, and that is going to continue. So the forum helps us to have a safety net around all of you, that we can try and move on together and work out what is going on and what is the best response. So as I say, if you haven't been already, the cakes are great, there's loads of coffee and tea, and we'd love to see you. Thank you.
I must have been at a different place because I've never had a cake, so I don't know where Jane's been hiding.
Oh, is that just a second?
It's a bit of a challenge for the next one, thank you. So, yes, so I think if we had a chat before Christmas, really to start to think about what this next year would bring for the Providers Network, and I think all of us thought that it would be really good if we could get some growth, so growth in the number of people there, but actually growth in the number of organisations that attend as well. So now you know about it, I'm sure we'll be able to make sure that everybody around the table knows when those sessions will be taking place for this year. And finally, I suppose the delivery of the development of a training passport. So we had a meeting about the training passport this morning. It was actually a positive meeting, I think. So when I first came into this job, training was something that was raised all the time. Why do we have to keep duplicating training? Lots of duplication, lots of effort, lots of voids in training places, the additional costs of that. Was that something that we could address? So we created a project charter, which is really saying what is it that we're trying to achieve. So with the training passport, it's about, it could be really whatever we wanted to achieve. It's geared towards support workers. We could, at its widest extent, it would be good if we could have a training passport that went across provider services, third and independent sectors, and statutory partners, so that we looked at the total capacity for training within the city and had a look at, if you imagine I always think if you take the roofs off different places and you could see all the training that's taking place, there must be a way of consolidating that. But of course, to consolidate it, we've got to get some agreement about what the training might look like, what's fit for my organisation, is it fit for your organisation, what happens if something goes wrong, all of these key challenges. Whose responsibility would it be if I've trained your member of staff and something goes wrong? What would happen? However, we had a really, really positive workshop a way back, I think it was in October last year. And we had quite a discussion about things like accountability. What would accountability look like in a training passport? How do we resolve that situation where I've trained somebody and then they come and work for somebody else and then something happens? So all of those questions. And I don't think there were many challenges that we had on the day that we couldn't square off. So we've put out an invitation, and we've got 4 organisations now that met this morning that have come together to agree to look at a test of change. We're working in partnership with Aberdeenshire Health and Social Care Partnership on this one. So actually Aberdeenshire Health and Social Care Partnership are going to have a look at moving and handling training, which is a real biggie, I think. And they're working with the NHS around that. And we're going to look at medication administration. On the day, we identified seven core skills that we thought would be appropriate for a training passport. We had a bit of a chat this morning. I was reading something about collaboratives last week, and I was thinking, should people be signing up to a training passport, or should it be a learning collaborative? I don't know. Anyway, so we're going to progress with that, and it's really quite tricky. So some of the things that we've got to think about are insurance. What do different organisations' insurance policies cover them for? How do we release staff to actually look at this? How do we validate it? How do we make sure that regulatory bodies are okay with it? So we're working with the Care Inspector at SSC around that. Could we have an Aberdeen open badge? So we're going to have a look at the SSC open badges and see if we can create Aberdeen City specific ones. So it's really, really encouraging that that's going to go ahead, and we were speaking about how we keep people updated about that, so we'll have to think about a sort of a communication. I think the communication will come out via the workshop attendees, but if anybody here around the room wants to hear more about it, again, just contact us after the session and let us know if you want to hear anything more about it. The idea being that we're starting small. That was a plea from the workshop. Please start small and don't overcomplicate it. And if there's a programme of work out there, let's not invent something ourselves. So that's what we're going to try and do. But I guess the key would be then, how do we roll that out? How do we spread? I think a test of change is easy-ish. But how do we then spread it across all organisations? And who wants to be part of it? Because the accountability is kind of the bit that we need people to sign off. We need people to agree that they're going to be part of this. So finally, I think it's my final slide, it is. There we go. So how do we make decisions within the partnership? How do commissioning decisions develop? So that's been another piece of work this year, and what we've just done is revamped our governance arrangements. So we now have a strategic commissioning programme board. So the purpose of the programme board for me is about that level of scrutiny, that level of governance. How have we made our commissioning decisions? So commissioning decisions will come through that strategic commissioning board, and within our strategic plan, if you have a look at it, we speak about principles with which we commission. So it's things like something that comes through that board has to be around outcomes, has to think about sustainability for the future, has to have looked at this whole system. There's about 10 different things that we would expect when things come through that. That board has a level of authority, but there's a restriction on that. It's just the way that we work. So anything beyond that would then go through our executive programme board, and from then in would go to our integrated joint board. So I think it's important that people know that, so there's a transparency and people understand, well, how did they make that decision? Was it just away in a quiet room, a couple of people, but actually now you can see that there is an absolute process that will be developing over the years. Tea and coffee now, I hope that it's here. Just going to check. Is it? There's a tea and coffee. Tea and coffee here?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Tea and coffee. And then it's time, feel free, we've got 15, 20 minutes to grab a cup of coffee. There's a lot of people and one small table at the end, so it almost feels like we should send people table by table, but there might be a bit of a traffic jam. Please feel free. Lots of people have come a long way. I'm sure there'll be, whenever you come to these things, there'll be, there's people that you've known for quite a long time. Please feel free to use the opportunity to network. And then come back to your tables for the open forum. Now, all we want from that open forum is just for you to say, what have you heard? What do you think? Is it the right way to do it? What feedback have you got for us? What questions have you got for us? We can't guarantee you that we'll be able to answer all of those questions this afternoon, but we can certainly take them away, and we will come back to you by email. And the only ground rules, and somebody gave me some advice about this, so I'm going to use it because I think they're really good. I would use it if I could find use them. Everybody's got something that they want to speak about. So just active listening and listen with an open heart. Okay? So help yourselves to tea and coffee, and we'll reconvene after the open forum. Okay, everybody. Sorry to break up conversations. Hello? I know. Oh. Don't bite. Anybody got a message? Hello, hello? Okay, so there's a little, ooh, it's a bit loud. There's a little bit more incentive on your table. I don't know that anybody needs any more chocolate after Christmas. I certainly don't, but just in case. So you might have to collaborate with your partners. I don't know how you split a chocolate-covered tea cake between two, but I'm sure there's a way of doing it. So welcome to the open space. When we were looking at the program, it seems half an hour seems like a lot of time, but I don't think it is actually. So I'm not going to there's no further ado. I just think, please just take the time to reflect on what you've heard. I think there's some key things, the bits about trust, the things about collaboration, the things about how do we go forwards in a new world. Just reflect on that. We would really, really like, I think the learning will come from the comments and the questions. So please don't come back without anything. Use the space well, okay? So half an hour's time and then I'll call you all back, okay? Thank you. Okay, thank you. I'm going to pull everybody back. Okay, that's fine. Oh. That wasn't in the plan. There you go, it's all better now. Oh dear, I don't know what I did. No, that's fine, okay. Right, I don't have a particular plan for this next bit, so I think it would be really helpful. I can pick on a particular table, if you like, or a particular table could just offer some comments or questions. Sandra, if we have a question that we can't answer, can you take a note of it? Would that be okay? Right. Okay, so who would like to start? And I'll run around with a microphone. Share the joy. All right, Sarah, thank you. Do you want to introduce yourself and say what your question or comment is?
My name's Sarah Ward. I'm a social care contract manager with Aberdeen City Council and work as part of the council's wider procurement service, which is shared across Aberdeen City and Aberdeenshire. So we just had a chat really about the role of technology and becoming a bit more creative and collaborative, and there's kind of no temporal order here, but I've listed 6 things. In terms of a tendering process and moving forward, it'll certainly be a more creative exercise given the chat about collaboration and sharing risk and things, so that'll certainly be a more creative exercise. We spoke about the Housing First Pathfinder. Two providers here at the table are involved in a consortium approach, and that led us down a discussion in terms of absolutely a potential model for the way forward for what we're speaking about today. The role in terms of technology to remove some of the cost out of the equation, which can then be used to focus on care. Our colleague here from IT said basically the technology is there in terms of how you ever want to configure it, however you want to share your information or whatever, the technology and the safety is there. We spoke about our colleagues here work with slightly more chaotic population, again for populations like that, the use of technology and improving quality of life for these people. And then we moved on to culture change, referral process, assessment processes, the ownership of data and the ownership of processes like that, and how we can use technology to share information more quickly, share assessments more quickly, and start moving into real-time sharing of information. And again, speaking about the flexibility that a consortium could bring, and collaboration is not new to the third sector. So as I say, not in temporal order, but if I've forgotten anything, is there anything? Is that yeah? Yeah. Smashing, thanks.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
Anybody else want to offer their thoughts, comments?
Thank you. Not really here.
They're talking about local areas and zones within the city, and then there's downtime, and downtime's not paid for. What do you do with that sort of length of gap? And usually the downtime, worst identified time apparently is the hour about 11 o'clock. It's in too late for breakfast and too early for lunch. So what do you do with people around that time? The idea of a portal was flagged up, and this is where names, carers who are qualified to care, put their name in so that they can be available to cover a shift from time to time. And if your name's in that list, you can be contacted to fill some of the gaps that crop up inevitably through sickness or lack of staff at any given time. There was an example from Angus, and that's around inland meetings and sort of coastal meetings, and this is a different one. This is to do with SDS specifically, and it's SDS options that used to be 3 and have moved to 2. So those of you who are working with SDS will understand that discussion, hopefully. that by changing it so it's that people were working in the same areas, 2 years later seems to be making really good sense. So whether that's something that you want to think about. Agencies, there is a need for agencies to pick up different bits and pieces of work. However, often the agency staff are picking up morning calls, which in actual fact, if you've got a staffing team, that's one of the probably easiest shifts to cover, and not the nighttime shifts. And it's just about balancing that out between balance of need and response. And lastly, really, it's about reviews and the cost associated with reviews and care reviews. And obviously, you'll all appreciate how important they are. But in actual fact, it's staff from the office that go out and do the reviews, and there is no payment for that recognised anywhere within contracting. So it's looking at that and building that into any next contract. And the very last thing is about variations. And there are some variations that are appearing between Aberdeen City standards and Aberdeenshire standards. For example, some of the partners are feeding back that the depth of detail is not necessary for some of the services in Aberdeenshire, but certainly are for the city. And just being mindful of that if you're working in both areas. Thank you. Have I missed anything in there? Right. Who can I pass this on to? Yep. Oh, next table. Thank you.
Hi folks, I'm Sandy. I'm one of the leadership team supporting Anne. Maybe just to feed back a couple of constructive challenges that were said at our table. One was maybe a reflection about were health colleagues always fully involved in the care of complex patients in the community? Was that a role that's just been commissioned, passed on to all our colleagues? And there was an example of some of our colleagues having to pay for complex training to look after people who might have formerly been looked after by the health service. So it was quite an interesting challenge. And another one, maybe just to reflect, was about the Providers Forum, and everybody was really positive about. But how do we involve organisations that are perhaps not funded to be involved in those types of forums? PAMIS being a good example of that, a national organisation not directly commissioned to be involved, but they are really keen to be involved. Just a couple of nice challenges there, I think, when we're reflecting.
Hi, my name is Gosha Duncan. I'm from Scottish Care, and like Sarah's table, we very much focused on the technology, but just the one thing to add on that we actually had a very good discussion about the low technology, such as text messages and phone calls and emails, and how we could actually use that to release the capacity, and how we can have a secure network that could be used to communicate between the providers and service users. The other thing that we have discussed was the inclusion of the housing provision, and how we could potentially pay more attention to the involvement of all the different housing associations in planning the future and the designing of the future housing provision. One more thing that we have discussed was the differences between the two frameworks in Aberdeen City. Currently, there is one framework for LD and a separate framework for older people, and a couple of providers around the table had the experience with both frameworks, and providing just for LD at first, and then moving on to providing services for the older people framework. They've seen a big difference in how the care is delivered, and it was suggested that perhaps we could minimize the gap. Is there anything else that I have forgot?
So I'm Catherine King, one of the social care contracts managers, and I think a lot of what we covered has been covered by other tables, but we started off with a lot of positives, that providers feel very involved, and that they feel that the sort of atmosphere at the moment between providers and commissioners is very positive and in a really good place. But there was a feeling of there's been lots of talk over the last year or so, and we need to just get on and do it. which is really positive. A lot about technology, which I think is common across other tables. Sort of providers like or want the freedom to be able to use different technology systems, but also to learn from each other. So maybe some sort of platform where we can actually share, what we're using, what works, what doesn't work. But say to have that not to be dictated to about what systems should be used. Can we have some learning from tests of change? So we're aware that there are different tests of change going on, but sort of to follow that through and to learn, what happened to those. Is there anything else that we had particularly? No. We did speak again about collaboration and consortiums and had mixed opinions on that, so it'll be interesting to see where those conversations go. Is there anything else? Nope. So I think a lot of what we had seems to be common across other tables.
Sharon Stirrett from SACRO. We were talking a bit about some of the learning that can come from some of the national public social partnerships. I'm personally involved in one of them, and we're talking about aspiring to, as a collaborative group, having shared objectives, shared needs assessment, risk assessments, training jointly, working to the same standards, sharing intellectual property. And I know it sounds easy to say, but it's a bit of a journey to get to that stage, is what I was saying. But we've got learning from that we would be happy to share. And the other thing we were talking about that's really welcome is, just the idea of longer contracts, because in terms of workforce retention and recruitment, you get some really great staff, but when it's coming close to the end of the contract, they disappear. And a lot of the staff probably do resurface around a lot of the organisations that are here today. So that was...
I was on table 4, so hopefully my colleagues on table 4 will back me up. So there was quite a lot of interest about the training passport. Is that right? We spoke about retention of staff being a significant challenge, and how do we all use the networks that we've got. I think there was a feeling that there's not an individual provider solution to that, but that's maybe a piece of work that we need to progress with going forwards. There were some technical questions around contracting, which I wasn't able to answer fully, I don't think. But I think hopefully people know that if there are particular questions, they can come back to me and we'll find the answers for that. One of the big things I was asking about was communication. So we've heard a lot about sharing tests of change, taking things forwards. How do we, so sometimes, even the likes of today, when we put this out, I wasn't quite sure what the reach would be and how people are receiving information, or how do we communicate with each other. I don't know that we necessarily came up with a solution. I think for things like this, we decided that Public Contract Scotland quite obviously had quite an impact, putting it out through that. But it's also about how do we communicate going forwards? What is our best platform for doing that? And I'm still not sure that I've got an answer to that. So because I think it's through communication that we are able to collaborate, but it's just how we do that. Is it the providers network? In which case we need to start pushing agenda items forward. So recruitment and retention of staff could be a really good session, but it's whether that's the right place. It's not a very long period of time to be discussing this, but you're aware that when you do have a provider network, you're taking people away from the day job as well. So it's how do we make these things meaningful? Anybody else have anything else to add? Nope. Okay. Would you like to say a few words? Just bring it on you. Would you like me just to move us into the next bit? Okay. Well, so I think this has been a really, really helpful afternoon. I think it's been really useful. We're obviously going to go on now to a particular topic around the arrangements for care at home and supported living going forwards. I'm not sure. I don't know. I think we did ask the question when we put this out that if people... now is a time, if you don't want to stay for that part of the discussion, then please feel free to leave, and then we'll just pick it up once people have made their way out of the room. Is there anybody that will be leaving? Yeah, so by all means, thank you very much for your time. It's been a really, really fantastic session. I've no idea.
I hope it is.
When it was going funny, I had completely forgotten that we had another presentation to go. It's this one. I'm just going to go and say thank you to people for coming.
Okay.
Okay.
Which buttons am I on to?
Just, I think either this one forward or I had to restart it.
Okay.
Okay, so it should be just forward and back.
Right, okay.
Okay.
That's fine, thank you very much.
Talk as loud as you can at the microphone. I know it's a pain, but it's for the web people really, so they can hear it quite well.
If you can come back to your tables now, we'll be ready to crack on with the next part of the afternoon. Sorry? Right, can I have your attention, please? Final warning. I'm going to start anyway, whether you're listening or not. So first of all, just to introduce myself, my name's Jean Stewart-Coxon. I'm the Strategic Procurement Manager for Commercial and Procurement Shared Service. This is a bit of a long introduction. Our team works across Aberdeenshire and Aberdeen City Councils, commissioning, procuring and contracting for social care services. Just to be clear, obviously the tenders that I'm talking about today are for Aberdeen City's Health and Social Care Partnership. Some of you may be aware of other work that's going on in Aberdeenshire, but today we're talking about Aberdeen City. So the first thing to say is that this is the kind of practical next steps to what you've been hearing already. This is us cracking on and doing things differently. And you'll see as I go through this presentation that what we're going to be commissioning looks quite different from the way we've contracted for things in the past. Is that better? Is that okay? Yep. So initially, there's going to be 2 tenders. We are talking about care at home and supported living services. And what's on the screen are some draft definitions of those services. We did consider looking at just doing 1 tender for all the services that people need, non-residential services. At this stage, we probably think that that's maybe a step too far, so we're taking a stepped approach to that. But by the end of the 4-year period, the aim is that all the services, all the non-residential services that we currently describe as care at home and supported living should be coming into the same kind of contractual arrangements. One important difference is somebody in the last presentation just mentioned that previously we've contracted for care at home services being thought of as services for older people and supported living services as being just for people with learning disabilities. And we're moving away from that. We're putting the person at the centre of this and thinking about the type of services that they might need. So these, although initially 2 different separate tenders and 2 sets of contractual arrangements, they offer types of service, not specifically for client groups. So when we're talking about care at home, that's about the lower intensity, more frequent visiting support. And when we're talking about supported living, we're talking about the much bigger packages of care that need to be wrapped around people, quite often up to 24/7 for those people to live independently in their own tenancies. So like I said, consideration was given to just having 1 set of contractual arrangements. We also did look at the work that Scotland Excel are doing to put in place some kind of national framework for procuring these services. But because we have wanted to continue working collaboratively with our local providers, we've decided not to join the national framework and to continue to do that work locally. It is the intention that over the 4-year term, these will merge into 1 set of arrangements, but we recognise that might be quite a significant piece of work, and we're not exactly sure how that's going to happen yet. So let's move on. Aims and objectives of this procurement. So, and this is all, you've heard this morning. We want to meet the individual and system-wide outcomes, including the aims of the strategic plan that's been described. To ensure market stability, that might be a little bit strong, but certainly to promote market stability, I'm not sure if anything we can do can completely ensure it, but certainly moving towards that market stability. To deliver care and support efficiently and effectively, including through the use of digital means and technology assisted care. And we've heard there's been quite a lot of discussion around tables on that very topic. and also, importantly, to ensure that delivery is aligned to the medium and longer term financial plan. There's been mention already about the pressure on finances, and that's no surprise to anybody. So we're looking at quite a different approach. We're looking at not just more of the same, not just another tender to do the same things in the same way. We're looking for collaboration rather than competition. But importantly for us, and you won't be surprised as a strategic procurement manager, we still have to do this in a way that complies with all the procurement legislation and the schemes of governance. So it's being able to do things differently, but it's still complying with all the rules. We estimate that over the next 4 years, on the two types of service, care at home and supported living, we'll be spending something in the region of about in excess of £80 million. So that's a lot of taxpayers' money, and we need to stay within the rules, and we're putting contracts in place for that. But like I say, this is about a different way of doing things, a different look and feel to the way these services are commissioned. And really, we don't at this point entirely know what the end of that is going to look like. So what we're asking for is we're asking providers to come with us on this journey to discover ways of doing things differently. So what we put out to tender might be, you will see, is we're asking for flexibility and commitment from people to work within something that might change the way it looks and the shape and the look and the feel of it as we go through the contractual term, because it will continue to develop within the next over the next 4 years. So I'll talk a little bit now about what the care at home tender is starting to look like and what the supported living one is starting to look like. And I would say that these are still kind of, this is a draft approach at the moment. I've got a slide on the timelines towards the end, and you'll see we'll have to kind of crack on with this fairly quickly. But this is what it's starting to look like, shaping up to look like so far. So when we're talking about care and supported home, once again, I would just remind that this is the type of service. It's not just a framework or contracts for all services for older people. This is about anybody who needs that kind of visiting support in their own homes. So we've heard quite a lot about longer contract terms would be very helpful. And the first point on here says 2 years initial term plus 2 one-year optional extensions. And technically that's true, but I think how we should think about this is really as a 4-year contract, but with breakpoints built into it in case we need to change anything. Because it's so new and different, it will continue to develop, and we're probably going to need those breakpoints to see, well, what needs to change at what point. Services will be for all adults, regardless of their primary needs. So, you know, like I said, not just client group specific. And I think that, I've covered this next point already to say that, you know, that's why we build the breakpoints in. But the intention is to really that this will run for the next 4 years. All services within care at home will eventually move from a unit price to an individual budget. Now, this is us moving away from the time and task towards an outcome focus. So it's putting the person who needs the care at the centre of this, looking at what outcomes we need to be delivered to meet their needs, and then how much money is required to do that. This will be a transitional thing. I don't think we'll get going on day one with everybody having an individual budget and an outcome-focused assessment, but it's certainly something that we're heading towards. And if you don't start, you'll never get there. So we'll build into this a transitional period, but certainly over the first year, we aim to be a significant way towards care for individuals in that way. The aim is to commission in 3 localities. So you may be aware of, I'm not sure, sorry, I missed the very beginning of Sandra's presentation whether there was any mention of the 3 localities within the partnership. But the partnership is divided into 3 geographical localities. There's North, Central and South. So we're going to arrange the care at home around those 3 localities. And increasingly over the next while, the partnership itself will be aligned to those localities. The contracts for care at home, care and support at home, will be with one prime provider for each locality. So we're looking at 3 main contracts for care and support at home. But other than that, we're not entirely sure what it might look like. There's various different options that you as providers may want to come back to us with. And some examples, taking in feedback and discussions from work in provider forums, we've set out some of the examples that we think you might come to us with. So for example, it could be a primary provider delivering all the care and support that's needed in the locality that they're applying for. It could be a primary provider who organises and manages that care and support delivery, but actually subcontracts the delivery of care to various providers. It could be that the primary provider is a lead provider within a consortium. If providers wanted to get together and build consortiums to work in these 3 different localities. It could be that providers wanted to get together in a kind of partnership or alliance and form a new legal entity to provide the care and support in each of the areas. Those are some of the examples that we've thought of. You may think of others. Moving on to supported living. Again, 2 years initial term plus 2 one-year optional extensions, so a maximum term of 4 years. We're hoping that one won't go on for as long as 4 years. The aim actually is to bring that within the kind of locality model arrangements as soon as we possibly can. But we've given ourselves the wriggle room, if you want to call it that, in case it doesn't happen or it can't happen or there's roadblocks in the way that really prevent it happening. This tender will be initially for a very similar framework to the one that we have in place at the moment. In other words, it will be a framework of providers delivering supported living services to a range of people with a range of needs, a range of family groups. I think one of the differences there is that there may be some changes between what's currently thought of as care at home and what's currently thought of as supported living, because these frameworks have primarily been older people and learning disability. So there might be a bit of moving about between the two until it all kind of goes through and settles down. Potential for existing services that are outside the framework at the moment to transition into this new framework. So some contracts that sit outside either the current care at home or supported living will be brought into this during the term. Aim to align with the primary provider model within 2 years. We'd actually like to do it as soon as we possibly can, but like I say, the wriggle room there. So individual services purchased from the supported living framework, the intention is that they will be outcome focused, and the call-off arrangements for those will be pretty similar to what they are at the moment. So it'll include direct awards, possibly call-off competitions, and just matching up the most appropriate provision for the individual. Just check that I've covered everything here. So this slide outlines some of the challenges for us in terms of this very different way of commissioning these services. Unknown outcomes. We don't have all the answers to this. This is quite a different way of doing things for us. And one of the difficulties is, particularly with the care at home and the various possible outcomes of that, makes it very difficult to be very clear about how it's all going to work. It kind of depends on what is the most appropriate model that comes in with the bids for the tender. And then we'll kind of have to take that from there. The alignment of care at home and supported living contracts within the first 2 years or sooner if possible, I think that's a real challenge for us, as well as the geographical challenges of how would you align some services that or there might only be one resource that is for everybody across the city, and how would you align that to a locality model. The financial resources, that's another big challenge for us. If you remember one of the diagrams in Sandra's presentation, with the increasing demand, the decreasing finance and the decreasing staff resources, has led us to this, what's being described as a flat cash arrangement. So when these contracts are let, the value of the contracts will stay static throughout the term. And it's hoped that this different way of arranging services within these contractual arrangements will allow help support providers to make efficiencies that will help to reduce their costs. So, for example, the use of technology, the sharing of training, passport, those kind of things will support the reduction in actual provider costs. We're also going to introduce a financial resource from year 2 onwards. In year 1, the contract rates at the start will have been uplifted in line with inflation, and then they will be flat for the next 4 years onwards. But so from year 2 onwards, there will be the introduction of this investment fund that will be used to fund some of the technology that we've been talking about. And there will be a method developed of allocating that by some kind of collaborative means. We don't know exactly how that's going to work yet. But that kind of offsets some of the lack of uplift to the contract price, because the money is going to be invested in the technology and equipment. Need to increase efficiency to reduce costs. Well, that's kind of what we're talking about, really. Staffing resources, once again, a huge challenge for all of us. We know that there aren't increasing numbers of, if anything, there's decreasing numbers of staff. An aging workforce and increasing demand all the time. So that's going to be another huge challenge, I think. So we're not going into this naively thinking it'll all be plain sailing, it's all going to be dead easy. But what we are hoping that is by working together we can kind of overcome these challenges. Draft timetable. So here's evidence that we're cracking on with it, because this is quite a tight timeline. So we're aiming to publish these 2 tenders at the beginning of March. Final submission date will be towards the end of April, and then once we take our period of time to evaluate the submissions that we get, the contract award date will be the beginning of June. The contract implementation date will be later in the year, because we recognise that, you know, with the different kind of models that people might come and submit to us in terms of consortiums or alliances or whatever, time will be needed to set those up. So, you know, we're not kind of going to award the contracts on the 1st of June and expect them to be up and running on the 2nd of June. And I think that's kind of all I had to say, really. But I'm happy to try and answer any questions, or at least note any points of feedback. I hope did you want to add anything to that, Sandra? Yes, so I'll just hand over to Sandra to add to that.
Hi, good afternoon. Can you hear me okay at the back? Yeah. So I suppose what you've heard today is our ambition from ourselves as a partnership, how we would like to work in collaboration. The contract that Jean's outlined is taken from all the feedback that we've had and how all the work that we've done over the past year and a half. I think the biggest thing that we're asking for is, I think Anne described it earlier by saying it's like jumping in and holding your nose and just seeing what the deep end's going to bring. This is new for us all. We are looking for collaboration and really working for people to see how this will work. Yeah, so thanks for listening, and we'll get some questions now. I think between us, hopefully we can answer. I suppose Wendy just holds her hand up and we could just...
I could just be loud, I don't know.
I wasn't allowed to be
Is there going to be opportunity for a Q&A session within the next few weeks before the tender is actually published? Because obviously there's going to be a period of time for providers to sort of consolidate what we've heard this afternoon and mull it over.
Yeah, so as we said, the contract has been, there's two Vanguard organisations, both Inspire and One Accord Care, have been running a similar contract. We met recently with their frontline staff and asking how exactly is this landing, what is exactly the question. So it's anticipated over the course, I think, within about the next 3 to 4 weeks. We're hoping to have another session, a round table session, whereby we'll have everyone at the tables and be able to then do a really good Q&A, ask the questions, get there. Because what we are aware of is that this is an absolute new way of working, it's a new way of thinking, and it's more so for our frontline staff. The fact moved from time and task and being, I have to turn up at 9:30 and if I can't leave until my 23 minutes are up and all that kind of stuff. And even the technology about what that's going to look like with our CM2000, all of that questions. How do they operate that? How does that go? There's some fundamental, just really pragmatic questions that people need to ask. So we are going to have a session whereby people can get together. And like I said, and also we'll be working on, based on the learning from One Accord Care and the team there that have described the key parts of their training that their staff had, we need to start getting that invested to start to say, right, how can we escalate that for all our providers?
I guess the other thing I would say is that this is how things are shaping up so far, but this was the best opportunity to give you a heads up on all that this is going to kind of look quite different. And that's okay.
I guess I've got a few questions, but I'll just go with the kind of key one at the moment. And I maybe just missed it in the presentation, and that was around the housing support, the first one, the care at home. And is it an expectation that all client groups will come under this umbrella? So I guess if it's yes, has there been consideration to legal frameworks or organisations around primary contractors, etc.? That's just assuming, or perhaps it's not for today, but if you've got, for example, a third sector organisation, it would be a challenge for us to commission to private providers that have got means of profit. So these are things that need to be considered in governance areas as well. And I think 3 months is really tight to get that. I think the spirit of it is great, collaboration is all the way, but the timelines is really tight. And I guess has there been a definition of what does a primary contractor mean? You know, if you're holding the overall strategic way forward for that particular location, has that been thought through? Or has it been, is it thought through, is it still for input at this stage?
I think that to answer the bit about the primary provider, I think that's the bit that we're not being prescriptive about. So we are not going to sit in our darkened room, as was mentioned before, and say it's going to look like this. This is how we want it arranged. I think our expectation, our hope is that providers will work collaboratively to try and come up with models. How would that look how could that look? forward. And I think, yes, we have recognised the challenge of some private providers and third sector providers, profit making, not for profit, and how does that all work? We don't have the answers to that, but I think what we are kind of clear about is that the new kind of contractual arrangements will be for service types, not just for client groups. And I think that in recognition of that point is another reason why we've not put everything in the one free locality model right from the start. So we'll need to take a bit more time to factor all that in.
I'm just going to pick up on the reason that the three localities, I think there was some in the conversation earlier about geography being an absolute key component about how bringing in sustainability. But the other key part of that is that as a partnership we're moving into our localities. We have our three localities. We're also working with our locality empowerment groups, and the ambition from from our strategic aim, our strategic ambition, is that we're really looking at co-designing the services as we go further down the line. So in 2 years' time, we would be hoping that we'd be co-designing our services with our providers, with our people who use our services, lived experience, as well as with our operational staff. And that's going to be a journey that we're all going to be on to really understand what that looks like.
I had one of those tea cakes, so I need to get some steps in.
Has there been consideration for providers to become brokers?
Not specifically, but if that's the model that you would put forward, I guess what we'd be looking for is, well, how would you see that working? Oh, sorry.
So, the three sectors then, are you looking to include within that a responder service for nighttime? For nighttime support? Would you be looking to incorporate that?
I'll have to run back to Sandra for the answer to that one.
So we do currently have, the city does have a responder. So the city currently does have a responder service overnight for social care. But part of this as well is about looking at our service and looking at our whole system, so our step care approach with acute care at home. It's about joining this all up and seeing how can we start to put that together. I think the key bit for us is, as Jean's reiterated a couple of times, we don't have the answer. I think the knowledge and the experiences in this room is the key part about saying how do we move this forward. Part of the tender will be about how do you feel this could work, what would be a good operational model for you, how is this going to be financially viable, what will that look like. So we don't have all the answers. That's the scary bit.
Just to reiterate the point you made, if you're looking for innovation, you started this by saying you expected there were 20 suppliers or providers to come. You've got, what, 60 to 70? 2.5 months, not even 3 months, 2.5 months at the end of March is a short time for 70 people to sit down and think, how do we work together? Even taking away the legal aspect of that, you've got to figure out the practicalities of that. It doesn't seem to be much time, to be quite honest. So what can you do to facilitate the knowledge of who is interested, who's not interested in collaboration? And there's a couple of practical things here. Will we get all the slides today? Will we get a delegate list? Etc., etc. And are there going to be any open events?
So yes, you can get the slides. Yes, you can get a delegate list, assuming unless anybody doesn't want their name on it. And yes, we will be facilitating that Q&A session that we spoke of earlier. There will be one there. I understand that this might feel from now till March, but as Anne said right at the very start, we've been actually working through this since last March. So we've been working with a lot of your teams. There's been numerous invites out. We've had a lot of conversations. The reason for today was that staff, the people who were attending said, you need to speak to our chief execs, you need to speak to our board because you're asking us all about this. So these have been, what we've came up with has been designed by the people who are delivering services. It's not been by us thinking. So you're absolutely right. What we've got as a challenge, we will do whatever we can. We we want to work in collaboration, and we absolutely want to work with you. So if you come back to us and say we need, we'll do our best to facilitate that, and we're conscious of the timelines. Does that help?
Yeah, there was a topic, well, a word that came up at our table, and I think it's kind of important to mention, and that's the word decommissioning. And I think, obviously, with the graphs that you showed us, we know that money is incredibly tight, and I think looking into the future, decommissioning is going to have to be part of our world. And I think from a third sector perspective and an independent sector perspective, it might be good to have some reassurance that that's not just going to be a hit in the third and independent sector, but it's going to be cross-sector. And I'm just wondering what a sense of equality we'll have, or what discussion as we go forward over the next 5 years. Perhaps you could maybe give us a comment of what that might look like and how we might deal with it, because I just think we've got to bite the bullet, and that's part of it.
I can try. So part of the 5 years forward, I think it is about the 4 years about having that flat cash settlement. That's one of the key things that we were keen for. A, there's a time frame, and B, there's a fixed cost. The additional investment that Jean spoke of, that is absolutely about looking at the whole system and about saying, and we've had that whole thing today about technology, about using systems. I mean, doesn't mean we put iPads in for everybody, there's lots of numerous ways, but it'll be a collaborative part. The fact about the whole system is there's no one part that's going on at the same time. So we do have our areas of strategic commissioning that's been looked at. So care of older people has been looked at, rehab's been looked at, mental health, respiratory, palliative, and those are areas that the IGBs each have strategic planning responsibilities for. So all of this is getting taken into context, because that's about saying how do we start to shift services from acute into the community. But what we do understand is that we have to get our community services ready to be able to take that and start to work in a different way as well. So yes, absolutely whole system, linking in with our strategic planning and linking in with the whole sector. I can't stress enough that the bit about this is the co-production, is about working together, it's about what's best for Aberdeen, about our LOIP is a key document within the city, and it is about working towards that. Does that help?
Yeah. I'll ask it again in a year's time.
Yeah, but I suppose that the one part is, as we look across, this start with our care at home and our supported living, but as we move into other areas, decommissioning is there. We've been quite clear about that there will be areas that we need to stop doing, because it will be areas that we need to start doing. So, but that will be an open and transparent conversations.
I've got a question about technology and enabled innovation. I'm coming at it from a slightly different angle. Let's just say you're an organisation which believes it has a way of increasing efficiency through reducing costs, and you're looking to bring that innovation to market as a technology provider organisation, not as a service provider organisation. I think the implication of what you've been saying is that could present as a more fragmented customer base to sell into, because whereas before it's quite clear who's providing the services, who's going to be buying your technology, you now need to work with the winners of these different tenders, and I would see there might be 3 possible sources for technology innovation from what I'm hearing today. So that there could be the provider organisations that win the contracts may have their own view of what technology innovation looks like. I'm aware that there's a history in Aberdeenshire, nationally, of kind of grant-funded projects which point towards, let's say, best practice for Scotland, but which may not yet have been fully market tested or scaled up. And then you're hinting, I think, strongly towards a collaborative approach to specifying these different services. So, yeah, a little bit more detail about how innovative businesses might choose Aberdeen over other places where they might work.
I don't know if I can answer that. I think that you raised a lot of very valid points, and I think it, like we said, there will be an investment in that. We're not entirely sure how that investment is going to pull through yet. I would encourage any kind of technology providers to link up with the service providers for that kind of collaborative kind of working.
I'm going to see Anne's desperate to jump in. I think some of the feedback that we'd had when we were going through the workshops was that, for example, in Aberdeen City at the moment we use CM2000, and that's been a compulsory. Providers have had to use CM2000 for care at home. And in addition, a lot of providers have their own kit and their own services as well, and a lot of that's been about. So what we're saying is there might well be some efficiencies in there. But the whole thing about technology is it's just really asking people to work in a different way. We say about Alexa, it's at the moment we know from doing some research into how we provide services across the city that we have the biggest, about 39% of our services are staff are in the first couple of hours of the day, then after that it reduces down. So we know that if we want to try to build stability, we need to start to spread out that staff when are people going to come in. So things like technology, like Alexa, like smart things, there's RM systems, there's lots of different technologies about. So yeah, that's how we bid for that. I'm going to let Anne jump in.
It goes back to the fundamental question about us being able to express what our need is as well, isn't it? To me, the most important thing is to be able to collectively say what's the functionality that is required. And I don't know that we've got a particular sense of that. As part of the design of this, we created quite a few. We had 6 task and finish groups. So this has been informed by some of the work that those task and finish groups have done. And we had a really vibrant technology group that Gosha actually chairs. So I think part of the work that you've done is to scope out actually how are we using technology just now, and our uptake for technology is actually really, really low. But I see it as, the conversations going forwards, because I think just to reiterate what Jean has said, and I think it's been the experience of people that have been starting to work in this way, is that it will be the finished article on day one. We're not expecting it to be the finished article on day one. What we end up on, I suppose it goes back to that thinking about the future. So actually, in my head, I'm thinking where would we like to be in 4 years' time, so we don't have to make this radical shift in 4 years' time, because we'll be a lot more informed and a lot more used to working with each other and having conversations like this. But the fundamental thing is, before we think about what it is, we've got to describe what it is we need, otherwise our investment then is, there's a potential for us to waste money. And by bringing people around a table to have a conversation about how would technology work in this new world, that's where we would understand, be able to describe our need. And I guess that's how we would start to bring, by advertising that need, that's how we would start to bring people into the city.
Just to add to that, for me it's all part of being much more flexible and allowing, supporting that flexibility for providers to be able to deliver outcomes for individuals. So it's not about us saying, go along at 10 o'clock in the morning and stay for half an hour, and go again at 5 o'clock and stay for a quarter of an hour or whatever. It's about a much more flexible approach. So definitely moving away from time to task towards outcomes. And technology is really going to be a part of that, looking for different ways of delivering services.
And I think that's partly where the localities approach also comes in, because through the workshops people were saying, because I guess it's in order to meet people's needs and meet people's outcomes in the future, how do we return people to their life that they had before? So if you've been in hospital for 6 weeks because you've been acutely unwell in hospital, how do we get you back into connect connecting with your community? How do we sustain you to live as independently as possible? To do that, we need to have a sense of what's available locally to connect people into, and that's where the link with our localities and locality engagement groups comes for the future. So that's where the localities element of it is. We build that knowledge, because what came through the workshops was, how do we know what's going on in our locality? So working in the locality should hopefully add to that knowledge.
I'm on my way.
Probably don't need it.
Everybody else has to have it, so.
Am I right in thinking that when you say there's going to be 3 primary providers, each primary provider will have an area? Or yes, so they'll have either north, south, central. Okay. I think, well, that's, I agree that we need to move into the geographic thing completely. But 3 doesn't seem very much when we've got so many on the framework at the moment. I can't help but feel that what will happen is you'll have a mass exodus of staff who will panic that they're not going to get any work from their current employer. When word goes out on the grapevine that there's only 3 people in Aberdeen going to be providing care, you know?
Sorry, just to be clear about that, there will be 3 main contracts, but that's not to say there will only be 3 organisations delivering the care. So what I had hoped to try and get across was the different ways that might look. So it might be, you know, we can't kind of say that would never happen, that you wouldn't just get one provider offering to provide and actually deliver the care in any particular area. And if that was, you know, through evaluation, if that came out as the best way of doing it, then that would have to be the option that we chose. But our expectation is that providers will kind of collaborate with each other, form consortiums, form alliances, and work together. We don't want to lose any care staff, or we don't particularly want to lose any organisations through this process. What we want to do is just have that more collaborative approach, and certainly we don't want to scare off any staff. And I think that, you know, it would be true to say that there is enough work for, you know, individual members of staff to ensure that they will be able to continue working in this area. Did you want to add something?
So I suppose just to give a wee bit of assurance here, yeah, we are definitely not looking for just 3 providers. It's definitely not that. We are looking for multiple providers. The other key part is a lot of this will be based on we know data that we've used, the volume that we've of care at home services, for example. We know how much volume we've used over the past years, and we know how much with our modelling, how much we're likely to use over the next 4 years. So we also know within our areas in the city where our biggest population of older people are, we know that. So we can make some best guess, as in this is the cost that will go there. The other key thing to think about is some of the things that came back during the workshops, and some things that have been, this is about whole system. So for example, at the moment, every single package has an invoice attached. Every single invoice that has to go through. So I would hate to think of how much work across every single provider that takes to produce those invoices. So if you consider moving to primary providers with a fixed volume of contract and a fixed cost, that potentially is reducing to 12 invoices. So there should be overhead savings for all.
That's not the case, is it?
Was it? Yeah.
Yeah, Steve Robot with actually, Aberdeen City is the best place to invoice because we send you them electronically. Aberdeenshire is a nightmare trying to invoice, and we've actually pulled out of Aberdeenshire because of that. My concern, and I don't know if people are prepared to say that, I've just pulled out of a business area in England because of Swindon and primary providers. We had one primary provider, and what happened was they controlled the work, they got all the best packages, and then they also controlled the cash flow as well. So we went from 30-day payment terms to 60-day payment terms. We ran out of money. Right? So you've got to think really strong and hard about that. So yeah, you need to get that feedback, I'd say. Okay.
Yeah, when I said that the staff movement, because, okay, so we're an agency, we're from Aberdeen Nursing Agency. Staff need to be guaranteed work. So if the word goes out in the grapevine that there's 3 primary agency is going to get the work in Aberdeen, you can bet your bottom dollar they will panic, that they're not going to get any work with the smaller agencies and the smaller businesses that do provide care. They will move to the primary, and then I think that's weakening your position by doing that, because say one of the providers is not performing, you won't have the people coming at the back to help out when they're not performing, because they'll have all the staff. And staff recruitment it's not only difficult to recruit, it's really a lengthy process because of all the boxes they have to tick. You'll know that yourself. So my feeling is that if you give it to Prime, it's okay saying that we'll be able to go into a contract and subcontract through the primary contractor. That's fine. But there will be movement of staff. People will panic that they're not going to get work, and they will move away. And that's a major concern. I think it's a bit of a weakening point to make it just 3.
Yeah, maybe just build on that as well. Hi, Andy Newell from Bonaccord Care. I think if we're also expecting the primary providers to take more responsibility, that there needs to be an acknowledgement that you're also passing more cost to the primary provider. It's not making us more efficient. If we're managing or collaborating, if that's the right word, with a group of others, then it means it's consuming more time and more resource that at the moment we don't have.
Did you want to?
I was just going to say that, yeah, absolutely, that's what today's about. They're interesting points, and we can certainly follow up on some of these. The intention is not to pass across workload. The intention is definitely not to do that. But if that's the fears that people have, then we'll certainly can take some of that back from today.
Sorry, I'll be loud. Oh, sorry. Yeah, go on.
Just go back to what you said at the start, Jean, about flexibility and wanting people to work with the partnership. Is that the same way, for example, when the tenders come in, if they're quite loose? Because obviously, as the gentleman was saying earlier as well, timelines are tight, but the willingness, I think, is there about collaboration. But I do think it will be quite tight between today and the end of March to actually look at legal structures, look at costings, look at how people work together. So is a loose tender acceptable to say we will work with other providers, or has it got to be specifics around? I know that's very detailed, but I'm just trying to get my head around it.
I think this is one of the challenges for us, because we haven't kind of commissioned in this way before. So my expectation, we've already spoken to colleagues in legal about this, and you'll have seen in the timeline there's like the 2 stages. So bids, sorry, it's not on the screen anymore. I don't know why I'm pointing at it. So bids required or submissions required by a certain date, and then implementation won't be for another period of time after that, to allow for the most appropriate kind of submission in terms of the way that it will be structured and arranged to actually put that into place. So we're not expecting that providers, having got together and thought, right, that we can kind of form an alliance to do this, and that's going to be our approach. So we're not expecting them to have done that before they kind of suggest the idea, because it's not chosen as the best one. So and does that help too? Does that help a bit? Yeah. Sorry, I'll just go to Nick first.
Thank you. So, as part of this process, are there other partnership areas in Scotland that are taking this approach? No, I hadn't heard of any, so I expected that to be the answer. And have you spoken to any partnership areas in England that take this approach? Because just to sort of reiterate what Steve has said, I have got sort of part of a network across England, and I know people who work in this approach, and it has been problematic. I'm happy to provide contacts if you need. I have to be honest, I've been all up for a new change and a new approach, because I think it's absolutely needed. But this has come a bit of a curveball, and I understand there are sort of legal elements that we need to abide by. It seems almost counterintuitive, because we're going into a competitive tender, but then with taking a partnership approach, so we're competing with each other, but then we're supposed to be putting together potential networks and partnerships. I can't quite get my head around that.
It's a case of just being able to do this in a way that still complies with the legislation. If we're spending £84 million, then we can't just kind of you know, because of procurement legislation, we've got a light touch regime. We can be very light touch in terms of, you know, how
you need to listen
that
to
kind of thing.
providers. You really do need to listen to them. And if you're going to, that curveball comment is absolutely valid.
I appreciate what you've said, but could we not comply with the legal elements by going through a process so that we're all on a framework, a level playing field, and then start to look at how we can work together within the different localities? It just seems an unnecessary risk to be taking, because you know, the marketplace in Aberdeen is not stable. You know, it really isn't. And I appreciate where you're trying to get to. I just wonder if there's an alternative route, so we can comply with the legal bit and then partnership after that, and then it's safer for everybody.
Okay, so I think what would be really helpful is to get the information. You said that you've got some key contacts here, and I think that we can certainly take back what's been said. Yeah, we're not. It's not. I think it is what we said right at the start. We're not in a darkened room saying that this is exactly what we want. This is about working together. So if there's valid points here that we need to take into consideration that we haven't thought of, then and have not came up through our workshops and through the course of where we are, then yeah, we need to consider that. So the sooner rather than later, because our time frames are still. Yeah. Anyone else for any questions?
Thank you. I don't actually think I have an awful lot. I've been taking notes, so if I was silent, I wasn't paying attention. I've taken notes. So the people that have offered contacts and what have you, or information, I'll get back to you tomorrow and ask. Or if people just want to directly send things to me, that's absolutely fine. Be in touch about the space for people to once people have taken this away and had a think about it, and the questions and what have you. I'm sure there's lots of people to think about. I don't want to keep anybody for unnecessarily longer than we should, because there's obviously a big storm brewing outside. So thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much for your cooperation. Thank you for listening. Thank you for the challenge that you've put back to us. It's really, really important, and we will take that forwards. Okay, so thank you. Safe journey home. That's the most important thing. Okay, bye-bye.